Okay, we're live.
Hi, I'm Deborah Lucci from the Deborah Lucci team. We sell real estate here in Massachusetts. We're a little bit north of Boston. And we have on here today, we have some team members, Nicole Leahy, Diana Silva, and Mackenzie Cormier. And our guest speaker today is Brian Cartier.
Cartier,
Did
yes.
I pronounce? Okay, so, and he's going to
Either way.
talk he's going to talk about solar panels today, and the girls have quite a few questions. And Brian, tell us a little bit about your company, how long you've been doing this. You know, what do you do?
Oh, well, great. So SunRun is a nationwide company that's existed since 2009. I've been in the industry for about 3 years now, covering pretty specifically the North Andover area and surrounding communities. So I originally started with a company called Vivint Solar that merged with SunRun over this past year. So we're now all SunRun, which just as a larger company, we're able to kind of pool resources. We went from being, the kind of basically we were each our own biggest competitor, and we merged this past year. So that's really offers us more products, more we'll say influence industry wide, with utility companies and so forth to be able to get more done.
So when you approach a homeowner, how do you explain the process? I mean, are these solar panels rented? Are they owned? Do they have options? What's the payback period? How do you figure out where they go in the house? Things like that.
Sure. I'm going to try putting my AirPods back in so I can hear you a little better. That might have been how I muted myself before. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So when I approach a homeowner, it's kind of funny you asked that question. Typically, when I approach a homeowner, they're not necessarily expecting to meet me, and I'm knocking on their door. The reason that direct to home is so effective essentially is because homeowners, it's a little bit more convenient to do things at the home face to face. I think is really the best way to generally do business in the first place. But
so you're door knocking
in terms of, yes, yeah, well, a lot of the time. But at this point in my career, I do get a lot of referral business, a lot of people that'll reach out to me because of things that they saw, whether it's on like a Facebook group or just through conversations with other people that I've worked with. But primarily, that's how things essentially start for the most part. So when I'm starting the conversation with somebody about solar, a lot of it begins with the fact that most of the power that we're using in Massachusetts is coming from out of state. So most of what customers are paying for is the delivery portion, which some people know this, some people don't even ever look at their bill, they just pay it and move on. But they notice those costs increasing, and they have to increase. I mean, it's a very old way of doing things. So all of the upgrades and maintenance that all of the current infrastructure needs, the cost of that has to get passed down to the customers somehow. So most people realize this. A lot of people don't necessarily think about it too much. They just pay their bill. But again, they see those costs increasing. And eventually it gets to a point where they start to wonder why, and they start to look for other options. So solar does cost less, or it should cost less. I mean, it really depends on how the person is looking to do it. So obviously you can lease a system, or quote unquote lease a system, or you can purchase a system. My company definitely offers both. SunRun actually pioneered what's called the PPA, which essentially it's solar as a service. So originally PPAs made more sense because there was no down payment made by the customer. It's basically solar as a service. So we install everything at no charge to the customer, and they simply pay for the power that we're producing for them. We do guarantee we're going to produce a set amount of power. So if they don't, if for some reason we have summer like we did this past summer, where we didn't get as much sun as we typically would have. If we don't produce what we guarantee the system to produce, the customer will get reimbursed. So there's a little protection there, and they're able to protect the rate that they're paying for power. So they're kind of insulated against the utilities increases, which we're about to see another big one. Actually, supposedly November 1st, they're going to go up about 52% for the supply portion. Not the entire rate, but the supply portion. So a lot of people, like I was talking about the two different charges, you have a supply charge and you have a delivery charge. So the supply charge is currently around 10 cents for most people if you're with your town aggregation, or if you haven't gone with the third party supplier, which can be more expensive. That supply charge is about to go from about 10 cents to about 15 cents.
So, like, what is the payback period?
Sorry, I missed a couple pieces of your question there. So, ownership and leasing so it really doesn't matter to me how a customer decides to do it. I just really want to help them make a smart decision. Now, ownership typically makes more sense for homes that get just absolutely blazing sun. Because of course, the more sun that a home gets, the less panels it will need to produce X amount of power. So more sun, smaller system, less expensive. But even somebody that gets great sun, or even just barely enough sun to kind of qualify, will still be able to lock in a lower rate per kilowatt hour than they're currently paying to their utility. So in terms of time it takes to pay it off, or to receive any kind of payoff for it, it depends on how they're doing it. But so if they're doing a PPA, they're automatically paying less than they were paying before to their utility. If they're buying the system, if they're financing it, really they should still have a lower loan payment than their current utility bill anyway. So it's not like they're spending a bunch of money up front and then waiting for a return on that investment. Their bill should go down immediately, or once the system starts to produce energy. The only way that they really have to I'm sorry, there's a little bit of a delay, but the only time that they really have to wait for any kind of payback essentially is if they're paying up front for the system, because then of course it'll take several years for what they invested to essentially be offset by the amount of bills they haven't had to pay to the utility company, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
It's funny. I've had customers. I remember I had these customers on Winter Street in North Andover. They owned the panels. Mm-hmm. And they were actually, she was trying to describe it to me, and she was saying to me, we're almost like a little utility company where we provide energy to other people. And then I've had people that have leased them. Now, tell me, let's say like we just had a big storm, okay? And let's say a tree went down or something happened to these panels. Who's responsible for that?
So if something happens to the panels, so under a PPA, we insure everything. It's our equipment. So if anything should happen to the panels themselves, we also insure our work, of course. So if anything, God forbid, happened, was wrong with the install, we cover that for the full term of the lease. So to kind of answer or to touch on what you were saying in terms of the people that own the system being like a little utility company, is there's also some confusion around the types of credits that somebody gets when they have solar. So there's two kinds of credits. There's net metering credits, which net metering is the reason that it makes sense to do solar. Basically, the best way to explain that is it's just like rollover minutes on your cell phone, right? So in the spring and summertime, when the system's producing more than the home is using, all that extra power gets fed back to the utility. So one of the best parts about solar and why it's necessary, especially in states like Massachusetts, is it gives us a local source of production, so that home is no longer essentially just draining from the grid. It's actually feeding back to it. Theoretically, if this time to produce enough of the customer's power, they should be producing more power in the summertime. That's going to reflect as a negative credit on their national grid bill. So they'll actually have a negative bill that will accumulate all spring and summer, and then in the fall and winter, that's when they'll start using those negative credits when the system's not producing as much. So
Okay.
the other credits, so the SMART program is the Solar Massachusetts Renewable Target Program. And the SMART program basically at this point in national grid territory isn't really paying anything. If you talk to somebody who bought their system 5 or 10 years ago, they were getting paid a worthwhile amount for every single kilowatt hour of energy that the system produces, right? So then they would actually see a check from the utility company if they own the system. If they're leasing the system, then the company that owns the system would get that incentive. But in lieu of that, they're getting any maintenance covered, free insurance, and so forth on the system, and they haven't had to invest anything. They're simply just paying less for their power. Did I miss anything there?
No, I know the girls
Or
have
is there
some
anything
questions.
not clear?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I know the girls have some questions. Yep. So ladies, what would you like to ask?
I can go, I guess. So if somebody wanted to lease solar panels, what's the lease term? Like, what are their options? Is it a 15 or 20-year lease?
Yep. So it's a 25-year lease because and that's
Okay.
typically, I think that's pretty industry standard. And that's because the warranty from the manufacturer on the system is 25 years, right?
Okay,
so everything's covered for that amount of time.
So if I lease solar panels for 25 years, I mean, I know that the technology has progressed so much with solar panels. Won't they be completely outdated by year 20? And now I have these old solar panels on my roof when the technology has come so far.
Sure. Yeah, no, and that's a very common question. People bring that up all the time. Honestly, like the way that solar has been installed hasn't changed that much in 40 years, and essentially the panels themselves hasn't changed that much, other than really the aesthetics of them. Now we're using a black panel in most cases rather than an old like checkerboard panel. You see the ones with the big silver grids on them. And the mounting hardware and so forth has gotten better, so that it doesn't sit as tall off the roof. It actually they look much more attractive now than they did before.
Brian, do you think they'll ever have?
But it's not quite like cell phones, where every year there's a completely new model. It typically it doesn't go that fast. There's a lot of stuff out there, obviously, that people are. I'm sorry. Did I miss something?
Yeah, I thought that they would pretty soon have like roof shingles that were solar.
Yep, and those do exist. They absolutely exist.
They must be very
expensive to do it that way. Yep, and so obviously everyone knows that you can get a Tesla roof. They are extremely expensive. In fact, this past year, there are a couple that exist in North Andover. There's one on Thistle Road, which is off of Abbott Street. There's one over on the street. But the solar roofs are very expensive. They're less efficient. They do look nice. However, not everybody that's buying a new car is buying, a Mercedes, So, but on that note as well, they aren't as efficient. And Elon Musk wasn't the first guy to come up with the solar roof. They've been attempting this for a long time, and one of the biggest issues with it is solar panels. They produce electricity, so they do produce a little bit of warmth. So it's a whole lot better to have airflow around the panel than to actually have the roof made out of solar panels. So there's a lot of things still being worked out with that. And it's really going to be a long time before it's what we all hope it'll be someday. I mean, honestly, I'm not going to argue that an actual solar roof isn't a great idea, but I think we're a long way from that being a reality for most people.
Mm-hmm. Brian, so speaking of efficiency, do the panels become less efficient over time?
Very slightly, yeah. So I mean, over time, there's one of the best parts of solar panels is that there are no moving parts. So versus other kinds of renewable energy like wind turbines and things like that, there's no moving parts to have to change really. So they require very little maintenance. But just like anything, over 25 years, yeah, it's going to lose just a tiny bit. It's less than a full percent. It's generally around like 0.07% efficiency that it'll lose per year.
So, Brian, when if a buyer was purchasing a home that already has solar panels, what's the transfer process like?
Mm-hmm. It's pretty easy actually. So currently, if I have a customer who has solar on his house, which I've had several, with the market being what it is lately, this last couple of years, I've had a lot of my customers sell their houses or refinance their house and that kind of thing. So what happens now is, so if a customer of mine is selling their house, as soon as it's listed on the MLS, something is triggered on our end, and a case is created, and a case manager will reach out to that customer, and they'll essentially we'll watch from the back end and see when that happens, and then they'll help facilitate that transfer when the time comes. It's generally pretty seamless.
Okay. And is
If
there
they're leased,
start?
are they,
Actually, going back to oh,
You can finish. Go ahead. There was a little bit of a delay.
so I think it got a little yeah, a little bit makes it fun. So yeah, who wants to go next?
go ahead, Diana.
So I don't know if we heard you finish, Brian.
Yeah, I don't think we did.
Oh, what's the last thing you heard? I'm sorry.
You were talking about, Diana, it was your
The
question.
transfer. Yeah, the
Right.
transferring it over. I was going to ask,
Oh,
is there a transfer fee?
okay. No, there's no fee to transfer. And so if I'm not sure where I cut out. So when a homeowner lists their home with solar, we automatically see it on the MLS. It automatically triggers a notification for us. And so we'll follow that process, right? We'll reach out to the customer, and when the time comes, it's really just a matter of the new customer, signing, a couple documents to transfer it over. At that time, that new homeowner has the option to just buy the system out if they want. And then you could just include it in the mortgage if you wanted to at that point or something like that. Or they can just take over the PPA. And then after 5 years or so, they have the option to buy it as well. But it's pretty seamless.
Okay.
Does
And
the
that's pretty
appraiser
common.
take in?
I've had several customers sell their house the last year.
I wonder if the appraiser takes into consideration the value of the solar panels.
They must. There was an article on realtormagazine.com. I don't know if any of you might have seen that, but it came out, I want to say, in April of this past year, saying that based on their research, on a nationwide average, homes with solar are selling for more. But it's probably tough to determine in a market the way like we have now, where everything's going for more.
Mm-hmm.
House doesn't even have to have a roof, and someone's going to buy it, I think.
What if the roof is in bad shape, but they want to install solar panels? Is that something that you guys will help out with in order to get the panels up there, or do they have to they have to take care of that first?
No, a lot of times we can help. I mean, obviously every roof is different, every scenario is different. But generally we can help. We have an in-house roofing department, and we do have. It's one of the only things we ever would use outside contractors for. One of the benefits of SunRun is that we do everything in-house. Like for all the installs are done in-house, not by contractors. But sometimes for a roof, we'll use Greater Boston Roofing, which is a pretty well-known roofer in the area. But sometimes we can help with the cost of the roof. Obviously, the roof needs to be in good enough shape for us to install on it, even just ethically, because I mean, if the customer is going to have to replace that roof, in a couple of years, it's just not going to make any sense. We want to get that done
Mm.
first. Right.
Have you ever had anybody want them removed?
Did I answer that completely? So like if a customer, let's say that a customer does need their roof replaced, say 10 years in or something like that, then they can reach out to us and we'll remove the system and store it and then reinstall it when the roof has been complete. Or they can reach out to us to do the roof, and we can include that in the quote for the actual roof.
Have you ever had
But
anybody want the
typically a
panels
roof.
removed? Have you ever had anybody want
I
the
have
panels
not, no.
removed? You have or have not?
I have not.
Okay.
I have not personally. There's certainly, I mean, as I'm sure you guys have seen, not every customer, as much as we do our best to make sure that every customer is happy, sometimes it just doesn't happen. But I've never had anybody go as far as to try to have the panels removed or anything. And generally, it was just something that just needed to be communicated better.
I was just thinking of from selling your home. If would some of the solar panels maybe deter a buyer, or would a buyer say, I don't want these panels up here anymore? I was thinking it more from that point. Have you ever heard that?
Okay. Okay. So quite honestly, I mean, you guys, I guess, would know better than me, but I would just assume if somebody's completely against solar panels, they're probably just not even going to look at the house. Just to be totally honest. If they're going to see it on the listing, they're going to know that they're there. If they're completely against it, they'll probably just look at a different house.
Yeah,
that's what we've generally found. I haven't had a customer have a problem selling the house with the panels on.
Mm-hmm.
On average, Brian, how much does it cost to either whether they were going to purchase the whole panel itself or if they were going to lease it? How much is the cost that people can consider?
So you broke up just a little bit for me, but I think you're just basically asking like the difference between like the cost difference between a lease and a purchase.
Yes.
Okay. So it depends on a couple of factors. It depends on how much the customer uses and how much sun the customer gets. So essentially how large the system is going to be and how much sun the customer does actually receive. So I hate to be so vague, but it's just really tough because every scenario really is completely different. But generally speaking, so most people in the North Andover area are paying somewhere between 25 and 27, 28 cents per kilowatt hour, including delivery. And depending on how much sun they get, their rate for a power purchase agreement would be somewhere between like 17 cents to 20 cents. So without any kind of investment on their part, they're simply just paying a lower rate for a better way to produce their power.
Okay. Thanks.
Does that make any sense? It does. For ownership, it really just depends on like how large the system is, and then what that system is going to cost versus how much of your power it's going to produce. If we're producing 100% of a customer's usage, then we're eliminating the national grid bill pretty much completely. So that they would actually just be paying us for their power.
Okay.
Brian, are there any downsides to having solar panels?
Any downsides? Okay, I want to make sure I didn't miss anything in your question. So you just asked if there were any downsides to having solar panels. Was there any other part because you kind of broke up a little bit? Okay. So really, the only downside is that not every home can qualify for it. So just not every house is going to get enough sun for it. Hold on. But in terms of downside, a customer with net metering and as long as their system is producing the right amount of power, they'll never pay more with solar, right? They're always going to pay less. And if they own the system, then that's kind of up to them. I mean, I can't imagine someone's going to buy the system and put it on their house if it's not going to essentially produce enough power, or if they don't get enough sun. In fact, we won't even do it unless it actually is going to work out for that customer and we can save them some money. So when it comes to downsides, I guess.
Do you have any stats on what percent?
You.
Yeah, do you have any stats on what percent of homes have solar now in Massachusetts or in this area?
Yes. So in Massachusetts, I want to say it's about 7 to 8% market penetration. It's funny. So I just got back from a trip with my wife to Hawaii, and the amount of solar there is absolutely staggering. And I mean, of course, they get a lot of sun there, but they deal with the same issue that we deal with here, whereas most of what they're paying for is delivery. So I guess one of the downsides, is like in Hawaii now at this point, you can't even get it. Essentially their grid is maxed out. So they're at about 60% market penetration, right? Oh. So you can't even get solar anymore because unless you have a battery with the system as well, essentially, so you're off grid, right? So because their grid essentially is maxed out, they don't have net metering there anymore. So realistically, that's it may take a while, but that's going to happen here as well. So as more people go solar, there's more upgrades that need to be done to the grid, which will make regular power even more expensive, because as they continue to upgrade the infrastructure, that cost, as we said, gets passed down to the customer. So and eventually we'll get to a point where essentially certain neighborhoods just won't be able to add any more solar, essentially.
So I wonder if that'll make the home price go up with the houses that have solar on them.
Well, really, I mean, realistically, in the next 5 to 10 years, it'll be kind of more strange if a house that's a good candidate and that's an obvious candidate for the rate that is growing. So there's about 4,000 homes every quarter in Massachusetts that are installed with solar.
Wow. Well, it's a lot.
Yeah, about 4,000 every 3 months. Yeah.
Now, do you ladies have any other questions?
I don't believe so. Just to clarify, Brian, you guys won't, if you have a consult with somebody, if you can't guarantee them that they're actually going to save any money by having these installed, you'll let them know and say that, either they don't qualify or it wouldn't be in their best interest unless they wanted to do it because of the, because it's, they want to go green or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if a customer has a home that's in the middle of the woods and they just don't get any sun, I've definitely had cases where somebody reached out because they really like solar, they really want to, look into it, and I'd get to their home and it's just not, or I'd see their home on an aerial and it's not going to make sense. I'm not going to be able to help that customer.
Got it.
And I do see that from time to time. But I've also had customers, voluntarily remove trees so that they can qualify.
Wow. So Brian,
because essentially, but basically, sorry, the delay is
we
a little bit.
We have a little bad connection here. So, so Brian, if people want to get a hold of you, how do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the best way to reach me is via text, probably. My phone number is 603-609-8030. Give me a text, give me a call. Text is always the best, though. I'm also easy to find on Facebook. I'm actually talked about quite a bit in the North Andover Moms group, which you guys may be familiar with. It's a pretty large group kind of
Yeah.
it covers all the bases, and I'm pretty fortunate to have a lot of really good reviews on there. And I kind of tell people, I guess it's so if I was, I kind of feel like on that group, not that I wouldn't be careful, just because of my ethics and so forth. Anyway, if I did anything that rubbed anybody the wrong way, I'd be eaten alive on that group. So, but
That's for sure.
yeah. So I'm pretty easy to find though.
Yeah. All right. So that says a lot about you if you're very positive on that group. That's good. Well, Brian, I want to thank you so much.
Right.
Yeah. I want to thank you so much for joining us today
No
and
problem.
giving us some information, our viewers some information. And thank you very much. And if you need to get in touch with Brian, you get his phone number, and he'll teach you a lot about solar. Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you,
Happy
everyone.
to help if anybody.
Yeah,
even
thank
if
you
there's
very
some
much.
general questions. Thanks a lot, guys. This was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep.